So, good morning, everyone. Yesterday, I was given this feedback that the colors of the slides are very light, so it's kind of straining. So, I try to change it, but you can still let me know if you don't like the colors. We'll start with this one UPSC question. This is 2021, the recent one. We don't have the answer key, but I think we should be able to solve this question. Okay. Okay, A and C. Hello. Is the sound clear at the back? So you cannot give me like two answers, no? It has to be yes or no. Like UPSC, only one answer can be correct here also. A. Okay, what was A? What is the option A? Okay, so online also we are getting answers D, A, B, C. All options they have given. कि आपको देख लो कौन सा सही लग रहा है. Okay. Consider the following bacteria, fungi and viruses. Which of the above can be cultured in artificial or synthetic medium? So, I told you about this, the concept of artificial medium or synthetic medium. That means no living component. No living component means nothing. Cell, enzyme, nothing would be present. So, in that kind of a medium, the virus will not be able to grow. So, you have to exclude the virus from this, and both bacteria and fungi, they can be grown. So, the answer would be 1 and 2 only, A. Okay, the answer is 1 and 2 only. And this very fact had been asked earlier also. So, there is one more question which we'll solve later on, which will be something similar to this. That was asked in 2013. This year, 21 May, they asked this again. So, it's kind of a repetition of something which already has been asked, and for that we have the answer key and the confirmed answer. So, with that we can very easily understand that the answer here would be 1 and 2 only, A. We are going to start with our topic of health. Very important. The disease portion is where most of the questions are going to be asked, and usually it is around a new disease which is there, and most of the new diseases are viral diseases. So you will see a lot of component of viruses being asked when it comes to the exam. As far as the predominant virus which we are struggling with, that is COVID, the challenge is that a lot is not understood. So it is difficult to have a question on this, talking about the symptoms of the disease or anything to do with the management disease also, because it is not really very well understood. The challenge with COVID is that it happened and the time frame to study it is very, very short. And even when the time frame is short, the idea is that there was no emphasis being given to understanding the virus or how it is progressing into a disease. The most of the emphasis around the world was to find ways to tackle it. And that also is becoming or has been very haphazard and random. Like anything and everything has been tried to see what is the result. But again, the data for all of those things is very small. Like you only with your experience would be able to understand that for transmission of COVID, different ways have been indicated. Like earlier on, it was said that it is spreading from non-living objects also. So there was this thing of sanitizing everything. The government was sending drives to sanitize the walls, the trees, everything was being sanitized. And you people also might have bought some of the products where you were sanitizing your curtains and doorknobs and all those things, right? That mode of transmission was considered to be very predominant. But later on, it kind of settled to the fact that the most powerful way of transmission was from one person to the other. So the concept of masks and social distancing, that became predominant. Then earlier, one of the first incidences when it was found in animals. So they said that it can spread through animals. It was there on WHO's website. It's probably still there. But we have still not found many cases or any cases, I'll say, where it has spread from animals. We have found it in animals. Okay, that is a thing. In different animals, dogs, cats, tigers, lions, it has been found somewhere. The virus has been found in different parts of the world. But transmission from that or catching the virus from that again has not been established. Okay, and the virus is also changing very rapidly, again, which makes it difficult to get into that sure thing ki हाँ ऐसा होता है. In terms of treatment also the same thing. Like in Delhi, it was a very popular thing to give plasma therapy. So you might have heard about plasma therapy. Maybe somebody has even received that. So plasma therapy, earlier they said yes, that's like something which must be done, and it was done for almost all patients who were being hospitalized. But later on, that was also said that no, it is also not giving any assured result, because obviously the results will vary in different patients. And for medicines also, there are no medicines, so they are trying out everything. They are giving the anti-malarial medicine for treatment. Again, all of this is random. What I am trying to tell you here from our perspective of the exam, that with this particular disease, which is the biggest disease which we are dealing with, we will not be asked questions. Like this year, one paper has already been done. No questions were asked on symptoms management or any such aspect of the disease. Why? Because it is not sure or it is not established. The same thing goes for the vaccine also. We'll study about vaccination process also today. Again, nothing can be said for that about with certainty, because the timeline is very, very small. A normal vaccine manufacture in the ideal scenario for a disease which is there, it takes like more than 10 years. 15 years is roughly the time period with what is needed for a vaccine to be created. But for this situation, because we wanted something urgent, so in the matter of 42 days, there was one vaccine, the first one which came out, right? And after that, we have a series. But again, if they are working or if they are not working, like when we'll come to that topic, you will have a lot of such questions कि अच्छा ये भी बताओ कौन सा vaccine अच्छा है, कौन सा कम अच्छा है. Nobody knows that. WHO also doesn't know that. We still don't know if the vaccines are working. First they said, okay, 2 doses should be fine. Now they're talking about booster doses around the world. Many countries have started doing it. India is also talking about it. There is a new strain. We don't know if that is going to be effective. Nobody knows that. So when you are preparing also, you will read a lot of articles on these aspects, talking about efficiency, effectiveness of different treatments, different vaccines. Don't go into that aspect. That's something which is not been established. That will not be asked. What you can probably be asked is about the virus and its structure. Like, is it an RNA virus? Something like that, which is established and sure. Those aspects will be asked. That is what you should try to prepare. Or if there is some thing which the government has done for it. Okay, a government scheme is there, or some company has made some vaccine. So maybe about the company or name of the vaccine, or what is the basic mechanism of the vaccine, that we should know, right? But the other aspects in terms of its disease and spread, that for COVID, because this is something which you're going to read more, so I'm telling you that you should not bother yourself with, because that's still uncertain. Anything which doesn't go into the textbook, that's not like an established fact. But any scientific aspects which are happening, like maybe some treatment, some diagnostic method is there. So that method is standard. How you are doing a particular test, that is standard. So if you read about that, that you can note. But yes, about the disease, that is still a little less known for everyone in the world. Okay, so you have to keep this in mind. In general, what I'll tell you is how you are supposed to be preparing this portion. We will be talking about some basic aspects, but when you come across any disease, okay, in the newspaper or anywhere, what you will do is, first of all, you have to note down its cause. What is the cause of the disease? I'll give you some basic parameters which you should keep in mind when you are preparing any particular disease. Then we have transmission. How is it being spread? Is it being spread through a mosquito? Is it being spread through drinking water, or whatever is its mode of spread? Then for some diseases, we have an origin which is known. Origin or areas of spread. Like for COVID virus, what happened? We have pointed out the origin to the Wuhan province in China. Okay, so that becomes its origin. Origin and particularly the spread part. This becomes important where a disease is limited to one part of the world. Like we have Nipah virus infection cases are coming in India, and in that we see most of the southern states which are affected. So that zone or that area should be known to you. Then the parts of or aspects of symptoms and management. Symptoms, diagnosis. Again, these parts are not going to be very significant for all diseases, but sometimes there is a characteristic feature. For example, there was this virus infection called Zika virus. So in that, when a child would be born with this virus, his head would be exceptionally small. Okay, so that exceptionally small size of the head, that kind of became a unique feature. So that, if there is something like that, that is what you should know. Otherwise, this you can just take an idea briefly. About diagnosis also, again, you don't have to go into the technical aspects of all diagnosis or all tests which are there. That you would not need to go into, but you go into it when there is a news item in the editorial about it. Like what kind of news item could be there? Suppose they are talking about how data is different by two diagnostic methods, or how the government is supporting one particular method of diagnosis and not preferring the other one. Such kind of policy related articles could be there, or comparative articles could be there. When that happens, when it is something which is in your main editorial, then you know that okay, this would need my attention. Okay, that is the time you prepare the methods of diagnosis. And in the last aspect of management, we have one important thing, which is any national programs or national efforts for management of a particular disease. Like we have the National Tuberculosis Program, National AIDS Control Program. When something like that is happening at the government level, then that is something you should be aware of. Okay, that is important. Again, That will be something which will be coming up in the current affairs. In your mains section of polity and governance, that is your general studies paper 2. In that also there is a possibility, if like government has rolled out a new act or a new scheme, so that would be very extensively covered in the current affairs. So you could be asked to write a critical review of that policy as such. That becomes a part of a portion of your social issues also, because health is one topic which you will be reading in a large scale there also, and the policy part also. So that integration is there, but from prelims perspective also there is a possibility of having a question on the any national programs. I'll tell you one standard source also which you can refer. So there is something called the India Yearbook. Have you heard about this? Okay, so this is a document which is released by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting every year. So it's going to come now that the new year is on the way, January, February, that's when they release it. And in that they give you data and information around all ministries, around all topics. So there they have a topic of health. In that they will be listing all the government programs, all the national programs and the policies, the setup, the infrastructure, everything they are going to explain in that in detail. Now obviously we don't have to read every word of that, right? But as a reference, like if you are going to look into some policy, maybe you want to read about the national tuberculosis policy, then this is a good source, because this is again the government's source. This is what the government is telling you. So this is the exact data. So you can use this as a reference. When I use the word reference, that means you don't have to read it cover to cover. That's the important aspect. Okay. One more thing before we go to our topic is one website also which I want to share, because this is actually a very important topic in that sense. So we have there is the National Health Portal, National Health Portal of India. This is again a government page. See, because we are studying for a government exam, for any information which we have to use, if we can use it from a government website, it's going to be most credible. And this you can try in other subjects also, because you know different sources can sometimes give you different informations. So if we can actually find a government source, that is going to be most credible. So in this National Health Portal, in its here menu, we have diseases, conditions A to Z. So they have alphabetized and given us all the diseases. Okay. But aisa nahi karna that you start reading from A and say ki okay till Z I will prepare all the diseases. That's not what is supposed to be done. This is again supposed to be the other way around, that you pick out a disease, right, which you want to read. So let's open one disease. If you are reading about something in the current affairs or anywhere and you think you need more information, so then that is the time you can go into it. So let's open Nipah virus infection. So just almost on the same lines which I mentioned to you, they have already categorized the information. So you have introduction, then symptoms, causes, diagnosis, management and prevention. Everything systematically they have given you in one place. So if you are looking for a disease or if you're going on the internet to search it, this is where you should give it a shot. This is where you can try it. Wherever there would be a national program involved, they would mention that also. Okay, so everything in one place you can get here. So this is the second reference which you can use for the disease portion, and of course the India Yearbook for the national programs. In the class, what we are going to do is we are going to do the major concepts which will help you understand all these things, right? We'll talk about a few aspects of a few selected diseases, but most of the base for this also is going to come from current affairs. Some of these topics and ideas might be new for you, so make sure you are understanding, and if there is any confusion you can ask. First we'll start with the definition of health. What do we mean when we use the word health? There are three attributes of health: physical, mental, and social. So when we say or when we use the word health, the idea is, the most simplest idea is having absence of disease. If you don't have a disease, that is what you can say is health. But along with that part, you also need the concept of well-being. And well-being on these three aspects. So physical well-being means physically you are okay, there is no disease. Mental, your mental setup, that is working well, and because human beings are social organisms, so you should be socially fitting. You should be able to socially interact and exist in the society. That aspect also would be included in your health. Okay, so we'll write this down, please. Health is the complete physical, mental, and social well-being of an individual and not merely the absence of disease. Not merely the absence of disease. Okay. Now we will categorize the disease portion broadly. Like the classification we did yesterday, the classification of animal kingdom, that was exact. Something which is an arthropod cannot be an annelid, right? But this is a more organic classification. It's a more conceptual classification, and in this there is definitely a possibility of a disease falling in more than one category also. Okay, so what you need to know is you need to understand the terms clearly. That if I am using a particular term, what does it mean? If I am using the word congenital, what does it mean? Okay, if I am using the word non-communicable, what does it mean? So that concept should be clear. First thing, congenital disease. We are having two broad categories. One is congenital, second is acquired. In the most simple terms, congenital is a disease which you are born with. So this is a disease which is right from the time of birth. Any disease with which a person is born with, for that we can call the word congenital disease. Second part would be anything that happens after it. After you are born, any disease which we get, That would be then acquired disease. Okay. Can you tell me any example or any idea about the congenital disease? Color blindness. Okay, yes, color blindness. We will study how color blindness is caused later on when we go to genetics. What about an acquired disease? Diabetes. Okay. COVID. Yes, of course. Anything which is happening to you after birth, that would be acquired. Okay. So this could be because of some microorganisms, something like diabetes, you said that is because of some lifestyle changes, or it can be like something like somebody has asthma because of pollution. So environmental factors could be involved, right? So let's write these two down, then we will go to the next part. Kwashiorkor, malaria, polio. Okay. Yes, these would be examples of acquired diseases, and hemophilia would be a congenital disease. Yes. Yes, please. Yeah, we will classify them as congenital diseases also. So genetic diseases, they will fall in this category. Okay. So write down first congenital diseases. Any abnormality in the structure, any abnormality in the structure or function, any abnormality in the structure or function of a person, which is present right from the time of birth, which is present right from the time of birth. Examples you can write down, like one example which was given, Down syndrome. We'll study about Down syndrome in genetics. Then congenital heart defect. So you might have heard about this fact that some people are born with some defect in their heart. Like the most common condition which you might have heard about is a hole in the heart, right? So that hole in the heart, that is a congenital heart defect. Other heart defects are also possible. That's just one of it. Then you can also write cleft lip. Cleft lip is a condition where the lips are not completely formed. There is a gap in the lip structure. That's what is called cleft lip. Acquired diseases. Acquired diseases. Any disease which is not present, any disease which is not present at the time of birth but develops at a later stage of the life of an organism at a later stage of the life of an organism is acquired disease. Now, in acquired diseases, we will further have two categories. One is communicable or infectious, and the second is non-communicable or non-infectious. So, there are diseases which are caused by microorganisms, like bacteria can cause some disease, virus can cause, fungi can cause, the different worms which we spoke about yesterday, they can cause diseases. So when organisms are the cause of diseases, we call them pathogens. Pathogens are disease causing organisms. So if virus is causing a disease, then virus will be the pathogen for that person. If bacteria is causing the disease, then bacteria is the pathogen. Okay. Any disease which is being caused because of a pathogen, we are going to call it a communicable or infectious disease. And all other kinds of diseases which are not caused by a pathogen, there will be non-communicable or non-infectious. Like we have any lifestyle disease or any disease due to the environment. That would be non-communicable or non-infectious. Okay. Like the examples which you gave, diabetes, or somebody here gave the example of blood pressure, high blood pressure. So that would come under your non-communicable diseases. But the other diseases like COVID, tuberculosis, hookworm infection, all of them would come under communicable or infectious diseases. Right? Let's write this down. Communicable or infectious diseases are caused by disease causing organisms called pathogens. Disease causing organisms called pathogens. And then you can, we will be doing this in detail, but still here you can write down two examples: COVID-19, tuberculosis. Non-infectious or non-communicable diseases. Diseases which are not caused by the pathogen. Diseases which are not caused by the pathogen, but by lifestyle or environmental factors. And examples you can write down: asthma and diabetes. Syndrome usually is a multiple organ kind of condition where multiple aspects are involved. Like the most common example of a syndrome is AIDS. Okay, the full form of AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So AIDS as such has no specific symptoms. For example, the tuberculosis or let's talk about malaria. So malaria symptoms we know are fever. High grade fever, that is the main symptom, it will always be there. In AIDS, what is going to happen, because it is a syndrome, there is no one established symptom which we will see with it. But what we will see is ultimately an overall health condition deteriorating, multiple organs, multiple systems getting involved, and different kinds of infections coming and becoming a very complicated kind of a situation. So it's kind of dealing with the overall condition with multiple factors, multiple symptoms, multiple organs being involved. Okay. Yeah. No. The definition of the word communicable or infectious means pathogen. Okay, I'll tell you what you are asking and where you are being confused. Let me clarify that aspect also. So there is a word called communicable and there is a word called contagious. So I think what you are thinking about is contagious. What is the meaning of contagious? Which can spread from one person to another person. Okay. So if I contact with somebody who has a disease, let me take the example of chicken pox. Somebody has chicken pox, I go in contact with that person, I can get chicken pox. So that disease is directly spreading to me. So it will be a contagious disease. Okay, or COVID-19 infection. It is contagious. I go in contact with a person who has this infection, I can get it, right? And they are still communicable. Why? Because communicable word means pathogens. The meaning of the word communicable is something which is caused by a pathogen. It can be contagious like these. Contagious का मतलब है direct spread. But this is also not a fixed condition. Not all communicable diseases will be spread from one person to the other directly. Communicable diseases can also be non-contagious. Can you think of an example where a disease which is caused by a pathogen but you will not get it by coming in contact? Malaria. Okay. Or any other disease which is caused by a mosquito, you will not get it like that. Or the example of AIDS also in that sense. It is also not directly going to be spreading by just coming and meeting a person. There's a mechanism. You need blood contact or a fluid contact for that. Okay. Or a disease like polio. If you meet somebody with polio, you don't get polio, right? Polio, malaria. So, you need clarity of these words very, very precisely. Communicable, wherever we are using this word, communicable, it means there is a pathogen involved. Communicable diseases can be contagious or can be non-contagious, right? I think what you want to ask is ki, can a disease be contagious even without being caused by a pathogen, right? Why? Was that the zone? The answer to that also is no. Non-communicable diseases will not spread through direct contact. Anything which is spreading through direct contact, it has to be because of a pathogen only. That means it has to be a communicable disease. And all communicable diseases necessarily do not have to be contagious. They can have other ways of transmission also. cleft lip would be a physical deformation rather than a disease. Okay, so if you read the definition, the Richa has asked this question. So if you read the definition of congenital disease, we have mentioned physical aspects or physical dysfunction also in that. So it can very much be an example. And the second thing which I want to tell you is, please don't make this an exact pathological debate. You don't have to bother yourself with the differences. Like yesterday also somebody was asking you what is disease, what is disorder, what is dysfunction, what is syndrome. आपको इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए, because this is very technical and it is beyond the scope of what you need to know. You need to know very basic ideas of these broader terms. Okay, so don't trouble yourself, right? This is, we are not exactly going to go into the pathological mechanisms of how we are differentiating this. I know these are very common ideas and these kind of questions are also there, but again, it for your sake, the terms can be used interchangeably. You don't have to really go into the technicalities of those things, right? So don't get troubled by that. Okay. Now we have another question, which is cancer an acquired disease? Yes, cancer is an acquired disease in most of the cases. We can have some instances of congenitally having cancer also, but in most people, in most of the times, it is something which happens after birth, right? It can be because of some genes which are defected. Okay, like there is for breast cancer, there is this gene called BRCA gene. Okay, that if somebody has that gene, so there is a greater chance of getting breast cancer, right? And in many parts of the world, people actually get themselves tested and get a preventative surgery also, even before cancer hits. So those kind of things are happening, right? So, but just because they have a gene, that doesn't mean that they will definitely have the disease. Not all people with defective gene, like in this example, get the disease. It increases their chance, but again, that's not a definitive thing, right? So even when it was there, that gene was there in their body right from the time of birth, the disease or the defect will develop at a later on stage, so we can still call it acquired. Acquired and unacquired non-communicable disease. Okay. All right. Yeah. Disability with physical injury, like an accident, right? If I fracture my leg, that cannot really qualify as a disease. Okay, that's exactly because of some accident which has happened. So that we will keep separate. But other than that, if I have some abnormality or some physical deformity which I am born with, that I can qualify as a disease. Malnutrition is also going to be an acquired disease, and in that a non-communicable category. All kinds of malnutrition means abnormality in the amount. So there are these two terms. If you've asked, I'll tell you. Malnutrition and when I use the word balanced nutrition, so I mean that I should get all the nutrients which my body needs. So all types, and in those all types also in the right amount. Okay. When I say that somebody has a balanced diet or balanced nutrition, that means they're getting all the nutrients which the body needs, so the 5 nutrients which we studied, and they are getting it in the right amount. When we use the word malnutrition, It can be any disbalance in this. Okay, so either there can be a deficiency or there can be excess. Both the things are malnutrition. This might be something which is a little difficult to imagine, but yes, obesity is also a condition of malnutrition. Usually we associate it with lack of nutrients only, but excess or deficiency, any of these are abnormalities of malnutrition, and many a times they will be reflected in the form of disease. Like vitamin deficiency is also a malnutrition condition. And for that we have different conditions which can amount to diseases, and they would be non-communicable acquired diseases when that happens. Allergies. Okay, there are a lot of diseases for that also. Allergy as such would be a symptom which could be there in many diseases. Like AIDS, for example, also has some allergic element. Okay. And there are many diseases. There are some genetic diseases also. So to categorize allergic reaction, for that we need to know what is the cause exactly. Then we can accordingly categorize it. ठीक है? Okay, आगे चलें. So we will be first talking about how the diseases are spreading. We are going to start with the communicable diseases or the infectious diseases. First talking about how they will be spreading. So in your communicable or infectious diseases, the first topic is going to be modes of transmission. Okay. Now I'm not dictating anything here, it is just a very basic idea just to say how diseases are spreading. You just have to correlate this with the examples. So can you tell me a disease which is spread through air? Okay, COVID-19. You have to keep writing this down. Okay. Then water. Cholera. Have you heard about cholera? Huh? Typhoid also. Okay. So food and water, usually the diseases are common because that same water goes into the preparation of food. So like typhoid, the example which you have given. So typhoid can be for both food and water, both the cases. Food may we can also give the example amoebiasis. Remember the amoeba? Which group does amoeba belong to? We did the categorization yesterday. Protista. Okay. So that causes a disease. The most common, the food poisoning which we say, which we will have food poisoning. That's basically amoebiasis. Then soil. Okay. Taenia solium also, it can be from soil, it can be from food. It's basically happening through beef. We'll take hookworm here. Ascaris also. Most of the worm infections. Then blood and body fluids. AIDS. No, not malaria. Malaria is from the mosquito. अनीमिया कौन से माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म से होता है ये बताओ पहले. We are talking about communicable diseases. Okay? Don't lose sight of the main thing. So only diseases caused by pathogens. That's what we are talking about here. Okay, direct contact, already said chicken pox. So there can be diseases which can spread through more than one mode also. Okay, so it's not fixed that one disease will spread only through one mode. So that is also possible. Then we have two terms, zoonotic and vector. Let's first see a little bit about vectors. So you've given me the example of malaria, which is spread through mosquitoes. So when mosquitoes are spreading a disease, how exactly are they doing it? One way is called the mechanical vector. So in mechanical vector, we have something like the cockroach. So cockroach on its body, so on its wings, on its antennas, on its legs, it can carry some pathogens, bacteria, virus, some worms maybe, that could get attached to its body. Okay, and then when it comes in contact with things like say your water or food, it can transfer that, right? There are a lot of these mosquito killing products which are there in the market. In those advertisements also, this is how they show it, that people are sleeping at night and the cockroaches are coming out and they're walking all over the food and the plates and all of those things. And then the doctor tells them that this is how you are falling sick because of it. So that way of transmission is mechanical transmission. That means from the surface, the pathogens are being carried and the spread is through contact. The second way is the transmission of malaria, biological vector. So in this, the pathogen is going to be inside the body of the vector. So what this mosquito does, this mosquito, so there is a person who has malaria. This goes and bites the person who has malaria. Okay, or any other disease. You can take a lot of viral disease also. They're like dengue. Okay, so it goes, it bites the person with dengue, picks out the dengue virus from its blood. When this mosquito will bite, it will pick out the virus and then go and bite another person and transfer that dengue virus. So basically what we are talking about is modes of transmission, how that transfer is taking place. This is transferring the pathogen by carrying it in its body and then biting and depositing the pathogen in the blood. So when this happens, we say it becomes a biological vector. So mechanical, matlab on the surface it is carrying, biological inside the body it is carrying. Okay, and different kinds of pathogens, bacteria, viruses, they can all be carried through both these methods. Now the term vector you should know clearly. The term vector means a carrier. When I say the carrier, that means this vector in itself will not have anything to do with the disease. The mosquito which is carrying dengue virus inside its body, he is not suffering from dengue. Okay. The only person who will suffer from dengue will be the person who is being bit by that mosquito. So the only job of the vector is being a carrier. Okay, like when transmission takes place from one person to the other. In that case, both the people are going to be suffering from the disease. If I have chicken pox and coming in contact with me, somebody else gets chicken pox, we both are suffering from chicken pox. But the vector has no such role. The vector will not suffer, its only job is to carry it. That's it. That's the basic definition of being a vector. And the mosquitoes, if you are ever thinking about what all things can be vectors, it is going to be the mosquitoes only. Most of the times, or Arthropoda family in general. They are going to be your vectors. Okay, let's write both these things. So Vipin has asked, can congenital disease ever end or it will never end? See, it will depend on what kind of a disease it is, right? For example, somebody is suffering from a congenital cleft lip or a congenital heart defect. If we have the possible arrangements now to correct it surgically. So if somebody had a cleft lip and I have reconstructed that with the help of reconstruction surgery, then that person no longer has cleft lip. That is a condition. But if you think somebody has Down syndrome, born with it congenitally, then that Down syndrome is going to stay with the person, at least with the technology which we have today. Later on, in some centuries later maybe, if there is a cure and we can correct that, that's a different thing. But as of now, yes, the person will have to stay with it. So this depends on the nature of the disease. We cannot like have a blanket term for that okay, they will stay or they will not stay. It will depend on the disease. Yes. Because that's not how it is spreading for as of now. Okay. And the second thing is, for something to be a vector, it has to spread that way continuously. Now people are getting it from each other. So that is the most, what should I say? That is the most relevant mode of transmission now. Second thing with COVID, again, no, there are no right answers, there are no perfect answers. So that's going to be my stand in that. Yes. Sorry? Yes, okay. Yes. This is a very big problem, and UNICEF has actually given an elaborate report on this concept, and that concept is, actually this is a little off track, but okay. There is this concept called hidden hunger. It's not just Indian diets, but in most parts of the world, that is what is happening. That fruits and vegetables are missing from the primary diets. And when we are trying to solve the concept of hunger in general, so we are focusing mainly on the grain-based diet. Okay, so in that sense, there is this idea that even when you have people who are sufficiently getting nutrients like carbs and proteins and such other things, the macronutrients, they still are suffering from malnutrition, and this idea is called hidden hunger. So there is an elaborate report about it. There are a lot of things which are being done and spoken about the fact that even when you give full meals, vitamins and minerals still stay deficient. So that also qualifies for hunger, right? So maybe you can read a little bit more into that. The UNICEF's report, the Global Hunger Index is there. As you read more, you will come across these concepts, right? Okay, we will not go into the discussion here as to how we can tackle it, right? I've just told you the concept. Write down vectors. Vectors are organisms. Vectors are organisms that do not cause the disease itself, do not cause the disease itself, but which spread the infection by taking pathogens from one person to another. Mechanical vectors carry pathogens on the surface of their body and transmit via physical contact. Biological vectors carry the pathogens within their bodies, and transmit via biting a person, and you can write down examples here for zoonotic. So you can write malaria, dengue, chikungunya, Zika. Now, with the vector, there is another term called zoonotic. Okay, now that you know what is a vector, zoonotic would be transmission from birds and animals. The difference in this kind of transmission as compared to vectors is that in this case, the birds and animals are also going to be suffering from the disease. Can you give me any example of a zoonotic disease? Okay, anthrax, Nipah virus, yes. Rabies, yes. Bird flu, rabies, anthrax, then plague. So in this, like bird flu, the most recent viral infection, the first identification that this disease is there is going to come from the fact that the birds start dying. That's how it is first identified, that okay, birds are dying. So that's how you know that okay, with coming in contact with these birds, you can get this disease. So this is the point to know, this is the point to differentiate. Zoonotic means the person is, or the bird or animal is also suffering, like rabies. You don't get rabies with the bite of every dog. Okay, if a dog bites a person, it's not every time that you will get rabies. only if the dog has rabies, it's suffering from rabies, then you get rabies. So, vector mein it is only a carrying mode, nothing to do with the disease. The vector only transfers, does not get the disease itself. In a zoonotic disease, the bird or animal is also suffering from the disease. You come in contact with them, you will also suffer from the disease. Okay, is this point clear? Right? Vector and zoonotic. And of course, examples. The last one is fomite. This means transmission of a pathogen from non-living things. Like for example, you get a skin disease or any other, okay, we'll take a simpler example. Somebody has common cold, you drink from their glass, you can get common cold. Right? Now this glass is a non-living object, right? But it can also spread the disease. Or as it is in the case of like the skin disease I was telling you. Okay, let's take the example of chicken pox only. So somebody has chicken pox, you are using that same bed sheet, that same blanket, you can also get chicken pox from that person. So that is why in a lot of diseases it is indicated that the bedding and the utensils of the person should be kept separate. Why? Because these can also become a way in which transmission can take place. Okay, so if that is happening, we say it is fomite transmission. You can give the example of common cold here. Yes. Okay. So, he's asking congenital diseases will be acquired from parents. Okay. Now, the answer to that is not a definite thing that it will always be acquired from parents. It can be acquired from parents, right? Like color blindness. You can get that from a colorblind parent or when both your parents are colorblind, right? But again, it's not a definite condition that somebody who has colorblind is colorblind, his parents would also be colorblind, right? They can give you genes. We will talk about genetic inheritance when we come to genetics, right? But that is again not a definite thing. That kind of transmission which you are getting from parents, that will be congenital. Hereditary transmission is one of the aspects, but it's not you can say it's not there in all cases. For example, at the time of birth, there can be some problem with that delivery process, because of which maybe some blood vessel becomes strained or some physical abnormality develops in a person and with which he is born, right? Now that has nothing to do with any transmission happening from the parent, right? That was maybe an accident or an injury that happened during that process. So that would also qualify as a congenital condition, right? Blue baby syndrome is happening because of the levels of nitrogen which are entering the blood, right? So that will be a congenital disease, but it has nothing to do with the mother. Mother is not suffering from that, right? Okay. It is, see, basic term yahi hai. Congenital means you are born and you have a disease. Bas. That's it. How it is happening, why it is happening, did the parents have it or not? Irrespective of that, if you are born with a particular condition, you are going to use the word congenital there. Yes, it is going to be congenital. It's there right from the time the baby is born. Right? Okay. So, let's go further into the different types of communicable diseases now. These are a few examples. We will first be doing bacterial diseases. We are going to take in broader concepts here. We are not going to be discussing all these diseases. This is just to give you an idea of the examples. Tuberculosis, leprosy, typhoid, tetanus, cholera, anthrax. Bacteria belong to which kingdom? Monera. Okay, the first one. Prokaryotic unicellular organisms with a potential of causing different kinds of diseases. Okay. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many other bacterial diseases also. These are just a few examples. We are going to briefly talk about tuberculosis here. The one disease which we are picking to discuss here. Now see, this portion from here, it's going to be something like less of dictation because there are no exact definitions or anything needed here. And most of the things would be like in small points like name of bacteria or things like that. So you can keep noting things as I'm writing them on the board, right? There is not going to be any specific discussion, dictation here. So tuberculosis is very important for India. We register the highest number of tuberculosis cases in the world. New cases every year. We are going for a very large number of cases. Even when this disease is completely curable, we have a large number of deaths happening because of tuberculosis. Now we'll understand that also, that why that is happening. First, let's talk about the pathogen involved here. The name of the bacteria which you have to learn is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So there is this bacteria which is responsible for causing tuberculosis. The most common place in the body where tuberculosis affects is the lungs. The most favorable site is the lungs, and we have a specific term here to describe the lungs, which is pulmonary. So when tuberculosis is around the lungs, we say it is pulmonary tuberculosis or pulmonary TB. Other organs which can also be involved are your intestine, few examples we'll write, brain, bone of course. And when this is the case, we say this is extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So when tuberculosis is around the lungs, we say it is pulmonary tuberculosis. When other organs are involved, we say it is extrapulmonary tuberculosis. I hope you are noting this down. Let's talk a little bit about pulmonary tuberculosis. The most of the cases of tuberculosis are the pulmonary tuberculosis type. So we'll talk a little bit about what happens in pulmonary tuberculosis? So we have a very, very important national program, the National Tuberculosis Program, which is highly advertised also. Who is the brand ambassador of the tuberculosis program in India? Amitabh Bachchan. Okay. Yes. Have you seen those ads? Can you tell me anything which we know about the symptom of tuberculosis there? Okay, cough for more than 7 days is incorrect. The number, you remember the dialogue, but the number is incorrect. 2 weeks. Yes, yes. So what happens is there's a person who is coughing, and Amitabh Bachchan will ask that since how long? That's the first question. Since how long have you been coughing? So when the person says around 2 weeks, so he tells them that more than 2 weeks, if you have been coughing, it could be tuberculosis. कि 2 हफ्ते से ज्यादा खांसी हो तो वो टीबी हो सकता है. ठीक है? That's the basic theme, and that is the first symptom which you need to know. Not just cough in that. Persistent cough for more than 15 days or 2 weeks. That becomes the first identifying feature of pulmonary tuberculosis. Persistent cough for more than 15 days. Okay. Then you have afternoon fever. Okay, so this can also easily be checked. A person can be asked to monitor the temperatures throughout the day at 4 different times, and then you'll find that this afternoon temperature is variable. Now this usually depends on the life cycle of the pathogen which is involved. That there is this is probably the time, the afternoon time, where there is maximum activity of the bacteria. So this is when you have the highest fever. So this is the second symptom. Then there is extreme weight loss. And you have a blood stained sputum. So sputum is your bulgum. So that can come out with some blood. And this is what is tested also. The test which would be done in this case would be the testing of the sputum. Okay, so sputum test. What do they check? They take that sample, they'll take it to the lab, and they will check for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Okay, and if Mycobacterium tuberculosis is present, then that would confirm that this person is suffering from tuberculosis. So that's how they first check it. And you have night sweats. So you have cough, fever, weight loss, blood stained sputum, and night sweats. Okay. Now, if we talk about pulmonary tuberculosis or any bacterial diseases in general, we have a very effective way to manage them. Okay. So we're going to talk about antibiotics. That's going to be our broader topic. But because we're talking about tuberculosis, so we are integrating it with that in a way. Have you heard about antibiotics? I'm sure you've taken it also at some point of time, right? Antibiotics are medicines which are given for killing your bacteria. Okay, so antibiotics are basically antibacterial drugs. So for different kinds of bacteria, different kinds of antibiotics are available. Okay. The job of these medicines or drugs are to make sure they destroy and remove the bacteria. So this means for tuberculosis also we have the possibility of 100% treatment and cure if the antibiotics do their job properly. Now with antibiotics, what happens is there is a drug therapy which is indicated. Drug therapy means just that there is a line of treatment which is there, specific line of treatment. What would that be? So when you take antibiotics, you are told about the dosage. There would be a specific dosage would be there, that okay, 125 milligram you have to take, 500 milligram you have to take, like that a number is there, right? Suna hai kabhi? Okay. Then with the dosage, they are going to tell you there is going to be a frequency also which is going to be involved. That okay, take it 2 times a day, take it once a day, thrice a day, like that. That specification is also there. And then there is a duration. Take it for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, right? That plan has to be followed. Now the design of this is based on the amount of infection which a person has and the kind of bacteria which is there. Okay, so based on that, this is designed, and a clinical practitioner, a doctor, is going to be suggesting this. With tuberculosis, this is actually a very long treatment, like 6 months, 9 months, like that. Longer duration treatments are there. And compliance to that long a period is what becomes a difficulty, and that is what is basically responsible for the failure of treatment. So a disease which we could cure is actually leading to the death of the people because they are not able to comply to the treatment which is there. And because if this treatment or if this line is not exactly followed, we have something which is called antibiotic resistance which will develop. Now this is a very important topic and we are going to take a little bit time understanding this. What is this antibiotic resistance? This means that there is a condition that the bacteria have now developed resistance to the antibiotic. So we are giving the antibiotic, but it is no longer effective on the bacteria. So some change has happened in the bacteria. This is a property of the bacteria. There's nothing wrong with the person's body. Okay, the person's body is the same. The only thing is, because of some reason, the bacteria have now changed. And they've changed in a way that the antibiotic is no longer effective on them. Okay. Now I'll show you one small cartoon before I take you to the causes of why this antibiotic resistance is happening. So a normal antibiotic is there, it will go kill the bacteria. Okay, so the antibiotic says we kill bacteria without antibiotic resistance. Okay, but if these bacteria have now become resistant. Because of any reason, if they have developed this property of resistance, then we can continue giving as much antibiotic as possible, but the bacteria will not die. And the antibiotic now says we can do nothing to these bacteria with antibiotic resistance. And the bacteria are actually very happy. They're enjoying destroying the immune system. So why and how is this happening? That's the next question we have. The first reason can be that it has a potential of happening naturally. Like you are now following the COVID virus and you know that the virus is changing, right? We have so many strains now that all the, I think, Greek alphabets are going to get exhausted. Alpha, beta, delta, all of these things are there. So that means that the structure of the virus is changing. So in that way, other organisms also change. So the bacteria can also change. So we have made an antibiotic based on the structure of the original bacteria. So if that structure itself changes, then our medicine will become ineffective. That's one way. The second thing is, any alteration in this treatment gives a loophole to the bacteria. And through that loophole, they can change their pathways and develop resistance. The most common examples or the most common case of not following this drug therapy would have definitely been practiced by you people, by me, by all of us at some point. So like if you fall sick, so maybe, you know, if, okay, let's say if I have fever, I go to the doctor, he says that you have some bacterial infection, gives me an antibiotic and asks me to take it for 5 days. Okay. Then after 3 days, I don't have fever, I am feeling okay, I stop taking the medicine. Right? The doctor said 5 days, I said, nahi, abhi to main theek ho gayi, so no more medicine for me. Okay, so I keep that 2 days medicine. So that's one strike for me. Okay. After that, after 6 months, again I have fever, which to me appears to be the same kind of fever. So I think, should I go to the doctor again? Or should I take the antibiotics which are already there? So I usually would think to myself, I'll go to the doctor, he'll take 2,000 rupees, then he'll give me the same antibiotic. What is the point? Padi to hai ghar mein, kha lo. So I'll take that medicine again. Now, the problem is, first, I might not have the same bacterial infection. The second thing is, I might not have had bacterial infection at all. This might be a viral infection, right? So I have done two things. One is I have not completed my first course. So that is a misuse of the drug therapy or the treatment which I was given. Second thing I have done is self-medication. So any case of over or under exposure, ठीक है, ये एक balanced format है, which is suggested, which is indicated to a specific person. Any disbalance in that, in terms of over or under use, will lead to a possibility of antibiotic resistance, right? Sometimes this overuse can happen even without taking medicines. For example, in our animal-based food products, so maybe I am taking milk, maybe I am taking meat, those animals which are becoming my food products, they might have given the antibiotics, and when I am consuming that, if it's the same antibiotic, my body is becoming unnecessarily exposed to that antibiotic. I did not need any antibiotic, but it is becoming exposed. So there might be some bacteria which are there, they are becoming exposed to the antibiotics and they might develop resistance. Even when I'm not taking medicines I can be exposed through that in foods. So maybe you have observed some food products now are marketed as antibiotic free. Okay, so a lot of non-vegetarian food items, they are marketed as being antibiotic free. That's like one thing which is there because there is a global discussion on this. There is also a possibility of antibiotics coming to somebody from the environment. Like there were reports of some pharmaceutical companies dumping their wastes untreated into the Ganga, into the river Ganga. So that meant antibiotics are there, and that meant anybody who is using that water for as drinking water is becoming exposed to that antibiotic. Okay, so that again is an overexposure, that again increases the possibility of resistance. Okay, so in different ways, whenever there is any alteration in the ideal amount of antibiotic which should be there for you, if there is any alteration, there is a possibility of developing of resistance. The next thing is, what happens once the bacteria is resistant? Can we do anything about it? The idea is no. There is no reversal once you have resistance which is developed to a particular antibiotic. The only option is to change the antibiotic. Once an antibiotic is ineffective over one type of bacteria, you have to change it. And this is the problem with tuberculosis in India. You will read a lot of editorials, a lot of debates on this. We have problems of varying kinds depending on how many drugs are ineffective. So we have multiple drug resistance, extensive drug resistance, okay, different kinds. What happens that we start with the basic drugs. Like for tuberculosis, the basic drug is called rifampicin. Okay, this is the first line of treatment for tuberculosis patient. Now, I am giving rifampicin to a person. I have told him that okay, for 6 months you have to take this medicine. Now the patient, considering the living conditions in India, the economic conditions in India, the patients find it difficult to continue taking this treatment. Sometimes the medicines which they get are expensive, sometimes they cannot, even if the government is providing the medicine, they have to still miss out on work to go to the hospital to collect that medicine. So when they are daily wagers or things like that, it is not very convenient for them to do that. So there might be some mismatch in that. They will not probably be doing the complete course. So this patient develops resistance, right? Because of not taking the dose daily, which he is supposed to, right? But still he continues to take rifampicin. Now his bacteria have become resistant. He is taking rifampicin. The bacteria do not care about rifampicin. Okay, they are still growing, and the person is taking rifampicin but not being cured. Now this person's bacteria, okay, resistance is the property of the bacteria. It will stay with the bacteria. So this bacteria, when this person with tuberculosis will spread it to somebody else, that person will have resistant bacteria already. But when he goes to the primary health center, they give him also rifampicin because they have no way to check that if this person is resistant or not, if the bacteria are resistant. Usko bhi rifampicin de diya, wo bhi nahi treat ho raha, ye bhi nahi treat ho raha. Right? You understand how this chain will go on. So the disease will spread, resistance will also spread, right? And the diagnosis of resistance is difficult, and it's not happening at our grassroots levels. So only in our secondary and tertiary centers, that is where the resistance will be checked for. And once it is checked, then we can change. From rifampicin, we can go for another medicine. We have cases in India where 4 medicines are also not working, 4 antibiotics, and even those where 6 are not working. Okay, so when 6 medicines are not working, uske upar there are not many options. There's hardly 1 or 2 options, and then those are very, very expensive. So ultimately, though that kind of a scenario leads to death of a person. For a curable disease, because we couldn't manage the antibiotics properly, it can become a serious problem. Okay, so that is why the government is talking about wisely prescribing antibiotics. They have mentioned there's a series of drugs like red line drugs where you will not be able to get them without a prescription. So self-medication they want to avoid. And of course with food products and other things also, that needs to be controlled. Okay. One last aspect, I'll make you write this also, which I want to point out here is, if you've understood this concept of resistance, this will help you everywhere else. Resistance is not just limited to bacteria. We can use a broader term called antimicrobial resistance. So this same drug resistance, the same concept can apply to antiviral drugs also, antifungal drugs also, anti-malarial drugs also. Everywhere the idea would be the same. If you talk about plants, insecticides, pesticides, there also this same idea will be used. Okay, overexposure or underexposure, any alteration in the ideal amount, that would lead to resistance. Like for example, if you are very enthusiastic about killing the mosquitoes of your house and you buy Baygon and you say कि मैं बस मच्छर मार दूंगा और बस यही काम पे हूँ, and every day you will be spraying Baygon, every day, every day, every day. After a few months, you will find that you are, spraying it, but the mosquitoes are not dying. You still have a lot of mosquitoes biting you at night. Why? Because they have become resistant to Baygon. You've exposed them so much that they have found some loophole, they found a way out to survive in that. Okay, and the only option you have now is to switch to Mortein. Okay, Baygon will not work. That's the most basic idea about resistance, which would be applicable everywhere. We are talking about antibiotic resistance because that was our topic, but otherwise broadly, this is the same idea applying over everything. So let's write this term so that you know it will be relevant in other places also. Then we will do a question based on this. Antimicrobial resistance is the ability of antimicrobial resistance is the ability of a microorganism like bacteria or virus to stop an antimicrobial medicine, like antibiotics, antivirals, antimalarials, antivirals, antimalarials, from working against it. It can occur naturally. It can occur naturally or by the misuse of, it can occur naturally or by the misuse of drug therapies. Standard treatments become ineffective infections persist and may spread to others. Standard treatments become ineffective, infections persist and may spread to others. Okay. We're going to take a break here. Then we'll come back and continue. Okay, so first let's solve this question, then we'll go ahead. Okay, D is one answer we are getting. Astha says it should be B. Okay. So, Hari, Harsh, they say it should be B. Nitya, Sonali, they say it should be D. D. Any other answer other than D? C. बोलो आप भी क्या याद रखोगे, लो एक और आंसर और बताओ कितने चाहिए? बी. बी. ऐसे वाले आते हैं ना उसमें ऑडियंस पोल में केबीसी में सारे आंसर्स देख लो. Now see, the sense which you should get from this question is that how complicated it is, right? And also of the fact that how clear the concept should be in your head to be able to tackle questions like these. Okay. This is something which you cannot find anywhere. In no one article, in no one book will you have all these points taken care of. It's only if you have correctly understood the concept and you can correlate it with the statement which are given here, then only you can solve this question. Let's see. Which of the following are the reasons for the occurrence of multi-drug resistance in microbial pathogens in India? First point, genetic predisposition of some people. Second, taking incorrect doses of antibiotics to cure diseases. Now, I think this is a point which should not be a confusion to anybody. Is this correct? Right? So this, see, we might not understand everything, but ye to I think this should not be a confusion for anyone. So we want 2 in our answer. So C is one option which is eliminated. Okay. So for such questions, it is very important that we take it one option at a time. Then next one is using antibiotics in livestock farming. What about this? This is also correct. Livestock farming, animal husbandry, if we are using the same antibiotics which we take in them through our food, they can come in our body. Okay, so that can be one of the reasons for resistance. So I think these 2 points should not be a point of confusion for you. The first and the last one, we'll see a little bit about them. But with this option also, we can eliminate one more. So ultimately now the game is between 2 options. And one thing which has become easier is you don't have to worry about what does one mean. It might be sometimes a struggle ki what is genetic predisposition, right? You might think like that sometimes. So for this question, they don't want you to know that, because these are the 2 more simpler statements. So if you can get to at least this, you will have only one option to worry about. So the last one, multiple chronic diseases in some people. And the first one is genetic predisposition of some people. Genetic predisposition means that somebody has an existing genetic condition because of which antibiotic resistance has developed in his body. This statement and the last one, both are talking about conditions of people. The ground line which you need to know about resistance is that resistance is a property of the organism, the microorganism, the pathogen, not of the person. Okay, if you understand this basic line, you will eliminate both of these statements. Because it does not matter what is happening with the person's body. It is ultimately what will happen to that bacteria, that virus, that fungus, that will determine the resistance. Because resistance is their property. They are the pathogens, are the ones who are becoming resistant. Okay, so if you think about this also, genetic predisposition of some people. If we can have genetic predisposition of the bacteria, then this could be correct. That okay, the bacteria has some special genetic features, some special genes because of which it has developed resistance. That could be correct, but it has nothing to do with the person. So answer to this one is B. Okay, I'll explain the last statement also here. You have some terms which we can talk about. One is chronic. Chronic and acute are 2 forms of diseases. So we have diseases which are acute and diseases which are chronic. Acute is a severe disease which is short duration. Okay. Chronic disease is less severe, but it is a long duration disease. That is its symptom. I'll give you an example also. So there's a person who has, say, a person has malaria. Severe condition, severe attack, the person has very high fever, unable to do any other activity, okay, is restricted. Very severe form of disease. So that is an acute disease. And it will go away after a few days. At the max 15 days, 20 days, then it goes away. On the other hand, think of a disease like asthma. So a person who has asthma, he can have asthma say for 30 years of his life. Since the day it is diagnosed, it's going to be there forever. Somebody has hypertension diagnosed at 30 years of age, goes on to live till 80, so that means 50 years continuously he had hypertension. Okay, so that kind of a disease is chronic. It is definitely less severe. It's not like somebody who has hypertension will not be able to do any work for those 50 years. It's not like that. So chronic diseases, less severe, long term, acute diseases, severe and short term. In most cases, a person or the acute form of the disease would be a communicable disease. Okay, the pathogenic diseases, in most cases, they are acute. There is infection, they do some damage to the body. After that, either the person will die or the disease will be cured. One of the two things will happen, but it is not going to go long term. Right? Chronic are mostly the non-communicable type of diseases. Okay, so like you have heart diseases, liver diseases, respiratory diseases, all those diseases, they can be chronic. Now let's go to the statement. It says multiple chronic diseases in some people. And then he is talking about microbial pathogens. Okay, so when we say somebody has multiple chronic disease, the most common probability is that he will have one disease like a heart disease, one disease of some hormone, right? One disease of say respiration, something like that will be his setup, right? There is a very rare possibility of somebody having multiple माइक्रोबियल डिजीजेस और मल्टीपल कम्युनिकेबल डिजीजेस कि अच्छा टाइफाइड भी है साथ में एमीबाइसिस भी है एंड कोविड भी है दैट्स लाइक अ रेयर थिंग you don't have that kind of condition. So multiple chronic means this is mostly around the non-communicable disease, and they are talking to you about multiple drug resistance in microbial pathogens. Okay, and this is not going to be aiding in the microbial resistance. Why? Because again, if this is a condition with some person, it is not going to change the state of the microorganisms or of the pathogens. Okay, so that state of a person suffering from different multiple diseases, that has also nothing to do with the drug resistance developing, because drug resistance would be happening in the pathogen. That is the basic line which you have to understand. Drug resistance is the property of the pathogen. That is the ground line. And because of that, your options 2 and 3 only are the ones which are going to be correct. Okay. Now these kind of questions, if you can eliminate or bring it down to 2 options, it's correct. But sometimes if you feel that you get stuck with all the options, then these would be the kind of questions which you should leave and not attempt in the exam. Ultimately, that choice is also important, which questions to leave. Okay, so if you think something like that is complicated, you can leave it also. But in most of the times, for biology, if you can just break down statements, simplify them, you should be able to get to the answer, right? Most of the things you would not have exactly read in terms of statements, but if you understand the concepts, you should be able to get it. Okay. Any confusion in this? Okay, we have 2 questions online. So Nitin has asked, are phobias considered to be a disease? Yes, we can group them under mental disorders or mental diseases. We'll come to that when we talk about non-communicable diseases. Then, according to UPSC, is AIDS a congenital disease? Now I have no idea what UPSC has to do with AIDS, but I can tell you about AIDS being congenital or not. If a person is born with AIDS, like there is a mother who has AIDS, she delivers a baby, then again this is not a definite transmission. It is not that a person, or even if both the parents are having AIDS, they can still have the possibility of having a child without AIDS. That is possible. But if they transfer it to the child, then that particular child will be said to have congenital AIDS because he was born with it. But as far as the parents are concerned, for them, it can be the non-congenital type of AIDS which they caught on later. It could be acquired. So this again depends on the stage where you get AIDS. Not a definite thing about AIDS being congenital or acquired, but it will be case specific. So if you're born with it, you say it is congenital. If you get it later on, it is acquired. That's the basic line. Okay? Okay. Going on further. Yes. Okay, it will change its structure. The question she has asked is that what happens to the bacteria that the medicine is ineffective now, right? So it has some change has happened in its structure, right? Like I told you the example of viruses changing, right? So like that it can change. There is one other concept of selection also, which will help you understand this. Suppose there are 10 bacteria, okay, and in that 10 bacteria there are 9 bacteria of one type and 1 of the other type. These 9 are the ones which can be killed by the effect of an antibiotic. But there is this one. See, we have variation, like in human beings also different people have different characters. Some people have more diseases, some have less diseases, there are different heights, different characters are there. So in that way, bacteria can also be of different types. Okay, so this one is slightly different. So the medicine, say, is less effective. For these 9s, the medicine is more effective. For this one, it is less effective for any reason in its structure. Now, we were supposed to give a particular dose, right, which we gave. So these ones which were supposed to be easily killed, they got killed. But we did not give the complete dose. So maybe we needed 5 days treatment for this to die. But we didn't give 5 days, we gave only 3 days. So this survived. Because this has survived, this now has a chance to multiply. And subsequently in further generations, ये जो property है which protected it, that can become enhanced. Right? That is one mechanism of selection. The other thing which can also happen is कि not only was it, we say it's not less effective, then maybe it was in a condition where it was already resistant. There was one which was already resistant. Then in that case also, what can happen is if it is already resistant, you can give the medicine, you can give any amount of medicine, it will still continue to growing. And after some time, the next 10 bacteria, all of them would be of this kind. So they'll survive, right? Okay. जी जी yeah yeah okay. So he's asking what happens when a person has both bacterial and viral infection. Most of the times when you have throat based infections, you have both kinds of infections. Okay, with taking the chance of a weaker territory, the viral infection and bacterial infections, they can happen together. So virus ke liye we don't have any effective treatments. The treatment which we will give is antibiotic treatment only. We'll talk about viruses and their medicines also. Hmm. Um, okay, so he's asking, is there a possibility of some other symptom happening if you are giving more than one kind of medication? So that will depend on what are the diseases. Usually, there can definitely be interactions between different medicines, right? That is why usually when a prescription is given, they ask you, are you taking any other medicine? Is there any medicine going on? Because accordingly they will plan. That is the job of your physician, to check that there should not be any reaction. That's how they are going to prescribe you medicines which are compatible. Right? Reactions are possible, but in the ideal scenario, that prescription will not be made, which can cause an interaction, because obviously studies have been done about different medicines and how they will interact with other medicines. Okay. Next, let's come to the protozoan diseases. The kingdom Protista, which was there. Amoebiasis, giardiasis, and malaria. These are a few protozoan organisms, or if we talk about the kingdom Protista. Kingdom Protista. Okay. Here we are going to discuss malaria. Malaria again is a very important disease for India. We again are having one of the highest number of cases every year of malaria. What is the mode of trans? हाँ एक ही पढ़ाना मुझे. Okay. See, we are just not going to be studying all the diseases. That's not possible, right? I just gave you a few examples for your reference. I gave you the important concepts, and that's how we are going to talk about all the other things. We're just dealing with examples. What you are going to do is, you're going to develop on any facts on diseases which are in news from current affairs. Okay? Okay, let's talk about malaria. From protozoan also, we are only going to discuss this one disease. How is malaria spread? What is its mode of transmission? Mosquitoes. What do we call that mode? Okay, vector-borne disease. The pathogen for malaria is called Plasmodium. There are two varieties of this Plasmodium. Plasmodium vivax and Plasmodium falciparum. There are other varieties of Plasmodium also which cause malaria. They're sometimes reported in the news also as new varieties which are causing malaria. But these are the most common ones. The most common Plasmodium varieties which cause malaria. Then there is a vector. Vector in this case is female Anopheles mosquito. Female Anopheles mosquito. So if there is a question, what causes malaria? The cause is going to be the pathogen. Vector is the mode of transmission. This vector is fixed. Plasmodium will not survive in any other mosquito. Okay, so if a person has plasmodium in his body, it's not that any mosquito which will bite, they can take in plasmodium. That's not what is going to be happening. This association is specific. Plasmodium will survive and be spread only through female Anopheles mosquito. Okay. Now the thing is to see how the cycle works or how this disease transmission cycle is happening or what is happening. So this is the malarial cycle. You can write this in the form of a flow chart or in points, however you are comfortable, so that you have an idea about the steps. So there is a mosquito which they have written the first infected mosquito. Infected mosquito means that it contains plasmodium. Okay, so there is a mosquito, it contains plasmodium and it goes and bites the first person. It goes and bites the first person. So that means now the blood of this person contains plasmodium. So while this person was bit, plasmodium was deposited into its blood. At this stage, plasmodium is in an inactive form. At this stage, when it comes into the blood, plasmodium is in inactive form. From here, it will go to the liver cells. Now, blood can take things everywhere. Blood is connected to all parts of the body. So blood takes this plasmodium into the liver cells. And this is where plasmodium becomes active and starts growing. So we have plasmodium being carried by a mosquito, female Anopheles mosquito. It bites a person. Then from the blood of the person, plasmodium goes into the liver and that's where it starts growing. It becomes active and its growth process starts. After this growth which has happened in the liver successfully, it will go back into the blood and in the blood also in the red blood cells. At this place in the red blood cells, plasmodium starts multiplying. Multiplication means reproduction process is happening. Okay, it is reproducing, it is increasing in number. And this is happening in the red blood cells. So first it is growing. When it comes into the blood, at that stage it is inactive. Then it becomes active when it goes to the liver. Once it is active, once it is growing, it goes into the red blood cell and there it starts multiplying. Now, this number this multiplication is so large, the number of plasmodium, it increases so much that these RBCs, they actually burst. They keep growing and growing and growing and increasing in number that the RBCs cannot accommodate them anymore. So the red blood cells, they burst. The red blood cells are destroyed. And once the red blood cells are burst, that would mean plasmodium again is released in blood. But this time the increase is going to be in a very, very large number because their numbers have greatly increased. So red blood cells they have destroyed and they have increased in number. And at this stage, the patient will have high fever. So this high fever will happen every time the red blood cells are breaking in this cycle. So this fever is intermittent. Intermittent means it's not like that the whole day the person will have high fever. That happens in smaller time periods. So the main identifying symptom of malaria is high intermittent fever. It's a high grade fever, but it is intermittent. It is not continuous. And then of course, a second mosquito can come, bite the person again, from its blood take plasmodium, and the transmission cycle will continue. So what you have to remember for the malarial cycle, there are two places where the activity of plasmodium is taking place. One is the liver, where growth is taking place. Then you have red blood cells, where multiplication is taking place. And then of course this whole circulation is happening with blood. Okay. The mosquito as such has nothing to do, no changes or nothing like that is happening in their body. So they are only the vector. We have effective medication to treat malaria. We call anti-malarial line of drugs is there. They are very effective. They can be given to people, and this plasmodium can be taken care of. Hydroxychloroquine is one example which also became kind of popular during COVID infection, but that is to target the plasmodium. These diseases are more common in the tropical countries. Can you think of any reason why malaria is more common in the tropical countries? Okay, heat. What happens with heat? Okay, yes, that is the heat and the moisture. That are these are ideal conditions for growth of the vector, which is the mosquito. So that is why during the rainy season, that's when their number is highest, because that's the season where you have growth of mosquitoes taking place. So because of that, the suitability of temperature and moisture leads to transmission of these vector-borne diseases in the tropical areas. Okay. And with the climate changing, with the global warming phenomena, other different parts of the world which did not have the higher temperatures earlier, they are also now having access to these kind of vector-borne diseases. So that's a challenge of global warming, that diseases which were earlier limited to the tropical areas, they are spreading to wider areas now. Fungal diseases. No concept is involved here, so we'll just be doing the examples. We have candidiasis, ringworm, and athlete's foot. So fungal infections would be mostly there wherever there is moisture. This candidiasis is actually caused by a fungus called Candida albicans. And this fungus is naturally present in your mouth. At all times, it is present in your mouth. Sometimes what happens is, because of, say, any conditions of some disease a person is suffering from, or there is the immune system is weak, or there is a basic problem of hygiene, in that case, this normal fungus can turn into a disease. So the white content or the white layer which you have on your tongue, if you've made that observation, that is this fungus only. So if you are not properly taking care of that or cleaning that, then that could be one reason for that developing into a disease. And when it develops into a disease, you can have swelling of tongue, you can have bleeding, pain, all those things can happen. So moral of the story is, you need to own a tongue cleaner if you already don't have it. Next is ringworm. रिंगवर्म के लिए पहले तो ये याद करना है, important point, ringworm is not a worm. It is a fungus. We'll talk about worms also after this, but ringworm is a fungus. And very common skin condition, ringworm infection, particularly in monsoons where there is more sweating and moisture, and very commonly advertised antifungal medication for ringworm. So any products you know about for ringworm infection? Itch guard, okay. Bas itch guard, sirf. Ring guard, okay. Betex. So all your varieties of dad, khad, khujli, they are ringworm infections, okay. And we have antifungal medicines, antifungal creams, lotions available to tackle this. These are very common infections. And then athlete's foot is something which happens in the socks, around your feet. Again, fungal infection because of the sweating and moisture in the feet. ठीक है? Antifungal medications, yeah. Eczema is a condition of the skin, okay, that's what we call. The reason for that can be varied. We have some bacteria which are involved, we have some parasites, some fungus which can be involved. It can be a complicated mixture of more than one type of pathogen also. But eczema broadly is the term to describe that. Just say fever a common term. Right? Ki fever can be because of malaria also, dengue also, like that. So eczema basically is the skin condition. It can happen because of any pathogen. Bacteria are most predominant cause of that. Okay. Next is helminthic diseases. Do you remember helminthis, the group? So for the purpose of categorization of diseases, both flatworms and roundworms are clubbed into one category. Their names, Platyhelminthes and Aschelminthes, together have been joined to call it helminthic diseases. And our government has a national program for this. National Helminthic Disease Control Program is also there. So you have examples here, Escherichiasis, Tiniasis, lymphatic filariasis, and hookworm infection. The worm infections are more common in children, okay, and they are very dangerous also when it comes to being in happening in children, because it will interfere with their growth. So you might have heard about the worms in children's bodies. Basically, it's their intestine. So जो पेट में कीड़े होना, right? The term which is used, that is for these worms. They are the worms of the helminthic family. So what they do is they go to the intestine and they prevent absorption of nutrients. So the child might be eating food, but he cannot use that food because these worms are interfering with that process of absorption. So you are giving food, you are giving all the nutrients, and still the child is not showing any growth. So it causes stunting of growth in children. That's why it is a very serious problem. And because hygiene concerns are also a little more on them, it is easier for them to catch this infection. What happens when they have these worms in their body? They will be hungry all the time, right? Because they are not getting the nutrition, so their body's normal mechanism is that, okay, they are hungry, they are eating a lot of food, they are maybe eating abnormally large amount of food, but again, they're not putting on any weight, they're not gaining any height, which as they are supposed to. This infection could be there in adults also. So maybe some of you also have that problem, or maybe you've heard about somebody or people who eat abnormally large amount of foods without it ever adding to their weight or anything. Like maybe, you know, somebody who can eat 50 puris in one meal. And then after that say ki acha paranthe le aao, right? So if that is the kind of diet which somebody has, then probably there is this problem of worms in their body, the helminthic worms. And it is more common in people, again, who do not have access to hygienic home cooked meals. The solution is to do deworming. So there's this one medicine which is available, which is given for controlling these worms. And this is supposed to be taken every 6 months. Okay, and it is indicated that as a preventive measure, it should be taken if you have any such problem. The government celebrates the National Deworming Day. According to the government program, there is a National Deworming Day. Again, following the same system of 6 months. So that means twice a year it will be there. I think September and February, something like that, are its dates. So in that, what they do is, all the children of all public schools in India are supposed to be taking that one medicine on that particular designated day. That's our program. The idea is to kill these worms. Okay. Okay, this teniasis example which you had given earlier, this is the main source of this happening is from undercooked pork. So tinea is the flatworm which is there in different animals. So pigs, cows, buffaloes. So when they are a part of the food which you are taking, and that pig or that cow was already affected by tinea, then, and if it's not cooked properly also, so proper adequate cooking can kill the flatworm which is there, but if it is undercooked, then the person can have teniasis, the disease. So Ascaris is a roundworm. This tinea is a flatworm, and the other two are also roundworms or nematodes. After this, we'll talk a little bit about viruses, viral diseases. Yes. What is the psoriasis? Psoriasis, I'm not very sure. I cannot really pinpoint. It should be a bacterial infection, I think. But again, I don't want to say something incorrect, so you can check. I'm sorry, I can't recall. Psoriasis. Okay. Viral diseases. The challenge with these viral diseases is that we do have some medicines against them, the antiviral medicines, but they are not very effective. Like in the case of bacterial diseases, we said it can perfectly eliminate the bacteria. We have some antiviral drugs which can control the growth of viruses, but that perfect elimination for viruses is not possible. So, you might have also made this observation that when it comes to viral diseases, the kind of treatments which are given, they are basically for the symptoms. Treatment of symptoms, like somebody is suffering from chikungunya. So a person with chikungunya suffers from very severe joint pains. So in that what they do is they give you a pain medication. कि pain है, pain का medicine लो. Or suppose the person has fever. So they give you fever medicine. Like let's talk about COVID. So COVID-19 main symptom is fever. So the medicine which they will give you is the fever medicine, the standard paracetamol, Dolo or any other variant of that. And then other things like drink nariyal pani or have more fluids, take a lot of rest. Those are the things which are indicated, but not exactly something to take care of the virus. That is not there. Only in very severe cases of the viral infection or very severe disease, like maybe in AIDS or in COVID also in advanced cases, there were some antiviral medicines which would be given, but not commonly to all. Why? Because those medicines are not very effective, and that's the biggest challenge in management of viruses, that we do not have many effective medications. So we treat the symptoms and ask the person to take rest, keep the body in the best form of diet in terms of water and fluids and food, so that naturally the body will fight it and recover from it. But in terms of medicines, we don't have that being very effective. That's the standard idea about viruses. Okay. Let's talk about hepatitis here, because globally this is the very, very fast progressing disease. There are various different types of it. Last year there was a Nobel Prize also around hepatitis. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Hepatitis is globally very, very highly infectious. Infectious means the progression of this disease is more, and more number of people are suffering from it, even more than HIV, right? And in this also, there are a lot of commonalities between HIV and this disease. First, let's understand what is hepatitis as a term. Okay. The term hepatic is the root of this, and hepatic means liver. Like we said, pulmonary means lungs, hepatic means liver. Itis, wherever you will find this term, it means inflammation. What does inflammation mean now? It is a group of symptoms. So you have redness, You have loss of function, pain, swelling, and high temperature. So wherever the word itis is being used, it would mean a combination of these symptoms. Like itis you have in arthritis, right? Arthritis means inflammation of your joints. Or gingivitis, inflammation of your gums. So wherever this term is there, itis, you should identify it with inflammation. This particular disease, hepatitis, is the inflammation happening in the liver. And wherever we are talking about liver, we will use the word hepatic. Now, this is the disease. The pathogen here which causes hepatitis is hepatitis virus. The name of the disease is hepatitis. The pathogen is hepatitis virus, and this virus is of 5 types. Structurally, there is a difference. Ultimately, the disease they are causing is the same. They are the same group, but there are 5 types. Like for Plasmodium, we said 2 common types. Here we have 5 types, and we have named them A, B, C, D, and E. A, B, C, and D, and E. There is a difference in the way these different forms of viruses in which they are spreading. Their mode of transmissions are different. A is mainly through food and water. B is mainly through body fluids. Let's say blood and body fluids could be together also. But here main transmission is through body fluids would mean anything. Your sexual fluids, your saliva, anything. Any fluids of the body. C is mainly through blood. Hepatitis D infection happens only when there is an existing hepatitis B infection. So, a person cannot get only hepatitis D infection. It can happen to people who already have a hepatitis B infection. Then E is also through contaminated food and water. You've heard about a condition called jaundice, right? So jaundice as such is not a disease, but it is like a symptom, like fever. Okay, so jaundice is what happens to the liver in this situation. And the most common cause of jaundice is through food and water contamination. And in that, The reason is jaundice can happen because of other reasons also, but hepatitis E infection is what is, or hepatitis A infection is what can be the viral cause of jaundice. Now, as I have told you that we do not have very effective antiviral drugs, so that means when a disease this serious like this, the people are dying because of this hepatitis, there is no cure as such. So our best bet is to make vaccines. Vaccines are preventive. You can give it before a person gets the disease to prevent the disease. As of now, we have vaccines for all of these 5 other than C. There is no vaccine for hepatitis C virus, but all the other 4, A, B, D and E, they have vaccines against them. Okay, so this is our basic premise of hepatitis, right? You will come across different viral diseases, a lot of new viral diseases also in the news. So make sure you are giving due attention to that, because we have had questions coming in this area. Okay, so in that sense it would be important. If I can tell you a little bit about your coronavirus also, a lot of or detail of this I will not go into, but yes, just some aspects. So coronavirus is a family of viruses. Okay, there are multiple viruses here also. It is an RNA based virus. This also we have already spoken about. I also told you about its shape like a crown with the protein coats coming outside. That's why its name is there. There are, as of now, 3 main varieties of coronavirus which we have observed in the last few years. They are SARS, then you have MERS, and you have COVID-19 or SARS-2 as it is called. So the basic main family is the same, which is coronavirus, and there are 3 known main varieties which have caused diseases. These viruses are mainly respiratory viruses. So they are causing diseases of the respiratory system. So cough is one of the common predominant feature of this kind of infection. COVID-19 is also called novel corona or the new coronavirus which is there. And presently the scenario which we have is that it is changing, and further in this also we have different types of viruses, alpha, beta, delta, and the latest one, Omicron. Right? So this is something which is still in the stage of more understanding on all aspects as we have spoken about. Okay, so we are let's solve one question first on viruses. A. So you see, this is the question I was telling you about earlier. The 2013, a similar fact on synthetic medium they had asked earlier also. right? Hence the significance of the previous year's papers. Viruses lack enzymes necessary for generation of energy. Is this correct? Okay, this is correct. This we know. Viruses can be cultured in any synthetic medium. Okay, this is incorrect. They cannot be synthesized in any synthetic medium. We can synthesize them in the lab, but we will need some living component because they do not have the enzymes as given in the first statement. So this is incorrect. Now if somebody had done this question, they would not have been confused in the question which came this year, because this is already clear. Now next statement, viruses are transmitted from one organism to the other by biological vectors only. Okay, so this is not correct. By mechanical vectors also. Both the types can be transmitted. There is no limitation to biological vectors. Okay, so 3 is also incorrect, 2 is also incorrect. Answer, as you have told, is A1 only. Okay. We have a question asking, what is the side effect of, can the side effect of any medicine cause hepatitis? See, hepatitis, we are studying it and talking about it as a viral disease. It is going to be caused by a virus, right? I think the point which you want to ask is that can we have any kind of liver disease or something like jaundice because of the effect of medicine? So if that is what you are asking, then the answer is yes. There are a lot of medicines which are mentioned as that it can have some side effects on the liver because liver is going to help in processing them. So that kind of a thing for liver damage is correct. When we use the word hepatitis, we are talking about the virus or the viral disease in particular. Okay. Okay. So online also we have got the answer A from everybody. Let's now very briefly talk about the non-communicable diseases. Non-infectious or non-communicable diseases. Now this is the leading cause of death in the world. More than 70% of the population is ultimately going to die because of the non-infectious diseases. They are the main cause of death. But most of the government policies and plans were around the communicable diseases only until now. But from here we have in India also the government taking recognition of this fact that we need to target the lifestyle diseases, we need to target the non-communicable diseases, and we have started with different programs for management of non-communicable diseases also. So you have like a diabetes national program is there and things like that, they have started coming in. Okay. So here the categorization is going to be a little fluid. There is no exact compartmentalization, like bacterial disease cannot be a fungal disease like that. Clear categorization is there. These are more explanatory or example kind of things which I am going to share with you. And I think, I'm sure you already know that, but just for the sake of one description, questions are not asked from this in the prelims exam mainly, but maybe because the government has started focusing on it, so maybe something somewhere you would need to add when you are writing about health anywhere. Okay. So let's write some examples. First one is cardiovascular diseases. Can you think of any example or any condition which will qualify as a cardiovascular disease? Okay, yes, the condition like heart attack, the most extreme form, or starting with hypertension. Then we can have respiratory diseases. Okay, bronchitis or asthma, then we can have some mental disorders also. Okay, Parkinson's disease, or the more simple aspects like conditions like chronic anxiety, depression, clinical depression, they will also qualify here. Then we can have the deficiency diseases, some of which we've already done, right? The vitamin and mineral deficiencies, they will also come under this category. Then we can have diseases because of the effect of the environment. So there can be some aspects, some issues with the environment which could be causing a disease, mainly the pollution related aspect, which you will study in a great deal when you study the environment subject. So there it would be there. I'll give you an example here. So we have the Minamata disease, which is because of excess of mercury. So what happens is the water bodies, they get polluted with mercury. Because of improper disposal, there is increased amount of mercury in the water. Then that mercury goes into fish, and when that fish is consumed, a person can have Minamata disease. Minamata is a town in Japan from which this name was derived. Okay. Endocrinal diseases, Priyanka is saying. Yeah, endocrinal diseases or hormone diseases can also come in this. Deficiency of hormones can also be there. We'll discuss hormones also. That's a topic we are supposed to cover. There can be some diseases under environmental diseases only, but just specific name is there for that, occupational diseases which are associated with the person's occupation, like Ashmita has given us an example, asbestosis or silicosis is there. So people who work with silica, they can inhale it and their lungs can have silicosis. The same thing is with asbestos. People working with asbestos, they can have asbestosis. So these are a few examples, and of course we can always add cancer to this category because cancer is non-communicable, non-infectious. Let's talk a little bit about cancer. So the cells of your body, they are supposed to have a definite life cycle. right? I think I mentioned this yesterday also. The cell are supposed to be created, then it is fixed how much they will divide and when they are going to die. Sometimes what happens is, because of some abnormality, the cells keep on dividing. Dividing means increasing in number. So there is uncontrolled cell division, which leads to an abnormal amount of mass being created. Like for example, if this is an organ, so some cells in this area, they will start dividing abnormally. So this can lead to an extra amount of tissue which would be grown. And this is basically what is happening in cancer. Abnormal, uncontrollable division of cells. So it is damaging the region where it is found. It can also damage, if there was like another organ, it could damage this organ also, its functioning also. These cells can travel in the blood, reach any part of the body, causing damage there. Okay, that is basically what is happening in cancer. If we think of the causes of cancer or why this abnormal growth is happening, again a definitive cause cannot be suggested for a particular person having cancer, but again through different researches which are happening around the world and different studies, we have identified some factors which can be associated with having cancer. So one of those causes genetics, that something is wrong with the genes. That could be one cause. Then we have an understanding that different kinds of radiations can lead to cancer. So radiations can be natural, like having skin cancer because of excessive UV radiations. Or some artificial nuclear radiations. For example, when there was this atomic bomb explosion on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right, that affected their population in such a way that incidences of cancer increased, and even now, after 3 generations or more, they still have a higher incidences of having cancer, people of that region. So that exposure to that atomic radiation, that can also be one of the causes of cancer. Then lifestyle related causes. So nowadays everything, right from an overly sedentary lifestyle to some form of abuse like smoking, alcohol, or other things like say pan chewing, areca nut, betel nut, all of these are known to be associated with different kinds of cancers in different parts. So like smoking will be associated with lungs, overindulgence in alcohol can be associated with the liver cancer, chewing of pan or tobacco or any kinds of other nuts can be associated with some form of oral cancer. Right? And nowadays more and more such things are being added to this list, right? From plastic to microwaves to a lot of other things are known to be linked with having cancer. Basically, what is happening is the cells are not stopping their division. That is the problem. So, in that sense, our treatments are not very perfect, but our options which are there, one is surgery. So I told you there is an area, there is an abnormal growth, you cut that part, you remove that part, problem solved. In cancers which have not spread to other parts of the body, this can be an easy solution. But when it has spread, then just doing this alone is not going to be sufficient. We give a line of chemicals or medicines, basically giving medicines, that is chemotherapy, and we can use some radiations to kill the cells which are destroying, which are dividing, to make sure that division can be stopped. That becomes radiotherapy. Why not cancer spreads in? Cancer can spread in brain. नहीं ऐसा नहीं है. See, incidences, he's asking why cancer doesn't spread to the brain. Incidences of different kinds of cancers are different, right? That maybe there is one cancer which is happening more, one is happening less, right? But again, there is as such no limitation to any part of the body not having cancer, right? That's the thing. Okay, so we'll come to the end of our class, right? Let me tell you some chapters which you can add here. If you have any questions, you can ask. We will talk about immunity and vaccination in our next class. You can read class 8th, chapter 2, then class 9th, chapter 13, and in your class 12th, there is this chapter. Now, I don't expect you to read this chapter entirely, but this chapter 8 is on health. So, it will talk about health. I will talk about vaccination and immunity process also, which we will do in our next class. So, just as a reference for some parts, if you want to take some idea, you can go through. This is going to be a little bit more advanced than the level which you need. So, you can use your discretion. Wherever you think something is overboard, you can leave that. In the next class, we will start with immunity and vaccination.